There have been great scenes of celebration in the streets in Australia as Australians said "I do" today to same-sex marriage. Just under 80% of eligible voters turned out for this. It was a non-binding postal survey, they called it. 61% voted to legalise same-sex marriage. Australia's Prime Minister has now pledged to pass a law by Christmas to make same-sex marriage legal. The Green Senator Sarah Hanson-Young has campaigned for marriage equality for many years now, introducing a private members' bill nearly a decade back. Senator Hanson-Young also kickstarted the Yes campaign for this historic vote. I spoke to her a little earlier this afternoon and she described to me how she felt when the result was announced.
Feeling pretty bloody good. I'm very, very proud of Australia right now. I just think our campaign, none of these issues are ever easily won, and yet Australians have turned out in droves to campaign, to make phone calls, to talk to friends and family, and most importantly, to post their votes back to the ABS. And with such a resounding yes vote, the Parliament has no other option now but to just get on and get this done.
So how will it actually proceed from here? Because as I understand it, there were a number of more conservative politicians in Australia who wanted to do things like protect religious freedoms as they saw it. They may be somehow damaged in their view by this. Where does that debate go now? How does that sort of play out?
So the bill that will go to the Senate tomorrow and that we will start debate on is a bill that changes the law so that it doesn't matter what your sexuality is, if you're two consenting, loving adults, you can get married, as it should and as the Australian people have asked for. In that bill, there is clarification around religious protection. So it says that if you're a religious organisation and you're a religious minister and you don't support this, then you don't have to marry a couple who are in a gay relationship. But it doesn't allow for further discrimination. It doesn't say that bakers or florists or taxi drivers can discriminate against couples that are getting married, or indeed guests who are attending the wedding, which of course even some of these conservatives who would like to wind back this overwhelming support for equality would have done. I think overwhelmingly there are still people, yes of course, some conservatives in this parliament who are going to try and cause trouble. But with such a resounding result, with such overwhelming support for equality, they will be drowned out. And the turnout has been amazing, just short of 80% in a voluntary vote, which is just unheard of here in Australia. And what I'm most proud about, Guyon, is the response from young Australians who overwhelmingly voted, turned out to vote and voted yes, close to 80%. And I just think that is incredibly positive for the future of this country.
I can hear it in your voice, how delighted you are, which is lovely. But have you got already stories or scenes that you can share? I'm just trying to get to what it actually means for people.
I've been on this journey for a long time. My first private members' bill when I entered the Parliament in 2008 was for marriage equality. I've had several other bills since then. In 2008, when that bill went to a vote, only 5 members in the entire Parliament voted for it. And I was told this wasn't an issue that Australians would care about. I was told this is a fringe issue. It's never going to happen. Well, how quickly things change over 9 years. We've seen other countries around the world change, and Australia is finally catching up.
I didn't want to say where the bloody hell are you, but
exactly. I mean, it's one thing to be beaten in the rugby. There's another thing to be beaten when it comes to marriage equality, and I must say I've been embarrassed ever since the amazing result of marriage equality coming to the fore in New Zealand. And we have been following you. And of course, we've been following the Parliament has been following the public. The public have dragged the parliament there. We now have to respond and respect the will of the people, and that's my message to Conservatives. Don't stuff this around. It would be an act of democratic bastardry and betrayal if people tried to stuff around with this now with parliamentary tactics. I urge them not to be that silly. Australians are smarter than that. We've got a great bullshit detector. They voted against that, and they voted yes for love.
And just finally and quickly, Sarah, I wanted to ask you about Manus Island and Prime Minister Turnbull's relationship with New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern over these negotiations, over what happens to these refugees. There's been some talk in the media here that Malcolm Turnbull has snubbed Jacinda Ardern, and also that the Australian government was leaking against New Zealand with these reports that 4 boats had been turned around where the people had been destined and bound for New Zealand. What do you make of the way Malcolm Turnbull is handling this issue with New Zealand at the moment?
Well, look, I think Malcolm Turnbull is handling this appallingly. It's just an international shame on Australia and stain on our reputation of a fair go to, on one hand, keep these people kind of abandoned on Manus Island at the behest of the Australian government, refuse to bring them to Australia, but then say, those that New Zealand is happy to take, they can't go there. I mean, that is the definition of cruelty. Keeping people in suffering, in harsh and inhumane conditions, beating all hope out of them, and then saying when there is a glimmer of hope, a glimmer of support from somebody else, that they can't be given that assistance. Can I say, I know your Prime Minister, Jacinda. I think she's a fantastic leader for decency, and she's really showing here in Australia that leadership doesn't have to be about being tough and nasty, that it can be shown in a strength of empathy and compassion.
That is the Green Senator Sarah Hanson-Young. We ended on Manus Island, but largely we're talking to her, weren't we, about the same-sex marriage survey. A big yes vote for that today.